Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching the videos. Again, we are watching videos on Chapter 5, Chapter 5.5. Today is going to be Chapter 5.5, or Section 5.5, Addition and Subtraction of Polynomials. So we've kind of finished up with working with exponents, kind of getting some ideas about the rules for exponents, and sometimes those are kind of tedious, but we understand that in order to work with polynomials, we need to kind of work with the exponents. And that kind of begs the question, why are we working with polynomials? Well, later on, we're going to be working with polynomials to kind of describe a couple different things. Polynomials are going to kind of describe the world for us. They're going to kind of talk about decay of radioactive isotopes. They could talk about things like profits that a company would make based on the number of photographs that they sell, or cost based on the number of photographs that you sell, revenue that you based on, again, the number of photographs that you sell at a wedding or something like that. And in order to work with those together, the profit and the revenue and the cost, we can work with the polynomials together, and those polynomials then, because they describe profit or revenue or cost, can be worked together. And now we need to kind of understand, before we can figure out how they work together, we need to figure out how the polynomials work together. So let's see, polynomials. We're going to talk about, this is going to be our description today. Let's see, hang on a second. This is going to be our description today of, sorry, hang on a second. It's going to be our description today of Introduction to Polynomials. It's 5.5, let's say A. We're going to talk about polynomials. Later on, we're going to talk about addition of polynomials, and then subtraction of polynomials, and then maybe some applications in geometry. But for sure, we're going to talk today about introduction of polynomials. That's today's section. All right. All right. So if we talk about the polynomials, I guess. So that's what we're going to try and learn today. But the polynomials put together exponents, like this says here. So if we talk about polynomials, we're going to, if we make an analogy between polynomials and a sentence, what we're talking about in 5.1 through 5.4 was kind of the, let's see, the vowels and consonants of the sentence. So if we're talking about vowels and consonants, you put vowels and consonants together, you get words. When you put the words together, you get a sentence. So we're going to talk about making that sentence out of words, and the words are terms like this. Remember, the terms are things that are separated by addition and subtraction. So those are the terms. There's subtraction. The terms would be then ax to the nth power, if you're talking about in general terms. Usually polynomials usually use one variable. Usually it's just x, but it could be x or y or z, and all those, they'd all be consistent probably with all of them. In all those terms would have some kind of x in it to some nth power. So polynomials are a single sentence, let's say, of a sum of terms of the form a times x to the nth power. There's a little multiplication in here that's not explicitly stated, but we know that it's multiplication. Remember, n works on just the x, because that's the base. X is the base, n is the power, n is the exponent. A would be then the coefficient. Coefficient, and that current term is nothing new. That's just the number that's in front of the variable. And the n is then the degree of the term. So each of these terms are going to have a degree associated with it, and the degree is just the nth power that's on the x. So let's take some of these examples and take a look at maybe some terms here. So if we've got a term here, here's our term, negative 12 z to the 7th power. And again, these are expressed in the form of a times x to the nth power. So again, a is our coefficient, x is our variable that's used in the polynomial, n is the power or the degree, and the degree then of that term would be the power that's on the end. So let's take a look over here. We're going to look for the coefficient. We're going to look for the degree. What's the coefficient? The coefficient is the number. The number includes that sign that's in front of it. So negative 12 is our coefficient. What's the degree? The degree is what's on the exponent, the exponent that's on the variable. The exponent here is 7, so our degree for this term, or this polynomial, because a polynomial could be just one term, the degree for this term is the 7th power. Let's take a look at again another term here. Some of these are just kind of the, let's see, maybe throwing some curveballs at you, but this one here, we'll take a look at this one here, x cubed. We have to understand again, if there's nothing in front of that x, we have to assume that there's a 1 in front of it. And we also have to assume that it's a positive 1 as well. So there's a positive 1 times x cubed. So with that in mind, if we just see x cubed, we have to remember, oh, there's a positive 1 there, so that coefficient, that number that's in front of that term, is 1, and it's a positive 1. We could assume that's a positive 1. We could just write the positive 1. That positive sign doesn't necessarily have to be there, but the 1 does. That's the coefficient. What's the degree? The degree on that term is the degree on the power, or sorry, the degree on the variable. Sorry, the power on the variable. So the degree is 3 because the power on the variable is 3. The power on the variable is 3. That's the degree of that term. Here's another one, 10 times w. Well, let's see, this one here is 10 times w. A couple things that are unwritten as well. We have to rewrite this as 10 times w to the first power because that w to the first power is not written there. We have to assume that that 1 is there. If there's no power there, we have to assume it's 1. So the coefficient is the number in front of the variable. 10 is the number in front of the variable. What's the degree of that term? The degree of that term is 1 because, again, it's not written, so we have to kind of assume that it's there. That's the degree right there. That's the degree of that term is 1. Last one is 7. If we've got 7, 7 could be a polynomial. 7 could be a term in a polynomial. So if we just see 7, we have to understand that there's something else that's not written there. We have to rewrite that as 7 times x to the 0th power. Remember, x to the 0th power, or really b, sorry, let's see, let me rewrite that again. B to the 0th power, I'll rewrite that. B to the 0th power is just defined as 1. So anything to the 0th power is 1, x to the 0th power is 1, so right there that's 1, so it's 7 times 1. But we write it this way just so that we know that there's a 7 as a coefficient in that term, and the x to the 0th power has a degree of 0. So that term has a degree of 0, which is the same as this term here has a degree of 0 because there's 0. The power in this term is to the 0th power, whatever variable it is, x or y or z. It happens to be x here in this example. X to the 0th power is 1, which is 7 times 1 is the same thing as 7, and that makes our degree equal to 0. Let's go to the next slide. So just for an FYI, there are a couple different ways we can talk about polynomials. There are a couple of shortcuts that we talk about. Polynomials first means many terms. Poly means many, so a polynomial means that there's many terms, and it's kind of the general term for all kinds of polynomials. Could be a term, or could be a polynomial, which is called a monomial, a special word for a polynomial with one term, like the examples we saw before, would be a monomial. Monomial has one term, like a monorail has just one rail that a train rides on. Monomial is just one term. Another example is a binomial. Bifocals, you get two things that you look through, you get two terms in the polynomial. Trinomial means, let's see, tri means 3, like a triangle has 3 sides, 3 angles. Triangle has 3 angles. Trinomial has 3 terms. Anything beyond that we don't have a special word for, but monomial, binomial, trinomial have special words of polynomials, but the whole idea is they're all polynomials. So to make our life easier when we're talking about polynomials, we can talk about the polynomials usually written in descending order. So that's important here. It makes our life easier later on if we write them in descending order, and that when we write things in descending order, we talk about the degree on each term. So if we write things in descending order, then we write things with the highest degree first, and the degree, remember, is the degree, the exponent that's on the polynomial, sorry, the exponent that's on the variable inside the term. That would be the degree. So we write the highest degree first, and that's called the leading term as well. The number in front of the leading term is called the leading coefficient. Again, leading term, leading coefficient, and the highest degree, like just like the firstborn child in the family, they're usually important ones. They kind of determine a lot of what goes on in the family. So the leading term determines a lot of information about the polynomial. It includes the leading coefficient, which is the coefficient that's on that leading term, and it also determines the degree of the polynomial. So the degree of the polynomial is the degree of that first term because that has the highest degree. Let's take some examples. So here again we've got a monomial. Monomial means we've got just one term. So here's our expression. Does not have an equal sign, and the expression is negative 3x to the fourth power. That's a term, but it's also a monomial because it's just got one term in the polynomial. If we write it in descending order, then we've got just one term, so we write it as negative 3x to the fourth power. What's the leading coefficient? The leading coefficient is the number that's on the leading term. What's the leading term? Well, we've only got one term. That would be negative 3 would be our leading coefficient. What's the degree of the polynomial? The degree of the polynomial is the degree of, or the power on, the variable that's in that leading term. Because we've got a monomial here, we've only got one term, and that means that the degree is the power that's on that exponent, or sorry, the power that's in the exponent, power that is the exponent that's on the variable. So the degree of the polynomial is just 4. So there's our degree of the polynomial. So now what I want you to do is stop the video, take a look at the rest of these. Here's 17, here's another monomial, here's two more binomials, here's two more trinomials as well. You can take a look at these and say, what is the leading coefficient? Because, let's see, for this one, it's not going to change a whole lot. But in the binomials and the trinomials, that's where we have to kind of test our knowledge. So stop the video. Figure out what the leading coefficient should be, figure out the degree of polynomial should be, and then come back. Alright, now that you had some time to kind of take a look at each of the expressions, each of the descending orders, they've kind of written the descending order for us, so we don't have to worry about that so much. Now we have to just kind of determine what the leading coefficient is. So what's the leading coefficient for this one here? Well, the leading coefficient is right here. Leading coefficient is the number that's on that leading term. The leading term is there's only one term there, so that's the leading term. Coefficient is the number. We could write this as 17x to the 0th power as well, and that would tell us the degree of this polynomial would be 0, because the power that's on the variable in the leading term tells us what the degree of the polynomial is. There's a 0 on the x power here. Sorry, a 0. It's x to the 0th power. The 0 is the power. The power goes here in the degree. Over here's our expression. In a binomial, now we've got two terms. Here's our expression. It's not a descending order because y to the 5th power has to be first, because again, a descending order, we write the highest degree first. The negative 6y to the 5th comes out and is our leading term. The plus 4y to the 3rd power becomes our second term. So this is our leading term, and that tells us what our leading coefficient is. Leading coefficient should be negative 6. The degree of the polynomial is the degree of the leading term, and that would be 5. So again, it's really important to write these in descending order. Here's another one, another binomial. We've got 1/2 minus 1/4 c. So we've got, again, this is not in descending order. We have to write it in descending order. We have to write negative 1/4 c, and again, the coefficient is the negative 1/4 in our leading term. So that's negative 1/4. Leading term is right here, the entire thing right there. The coefficient is negative 1/4. C is to the 1st power, so our degree of the coefficient is 1, because it's c to the 1st power. It's not written, so we have to kind of write it as c to the 1st power. Alright, trinomials. Let's see. We'll do the trinomials here. We'll do this trinomial here. 4p minus 3p cubed plus 8p to the 6th. Not written in descending order because p to the 6th power is higher than p to the 3rd power is higher than p to the 1st power. That's an unwritten one. That's right there. So we have to rewrite it in descending order. We have to write it as 8p to the 6th power minus 3p to the 3rd power, 6, 3, 1. That determines our descending order. So what's our leading coefficient? Leading coefficient is the coefficient, the number that's on, or that's attached to that leading number, leading term. The 8 is our leading coefficient. That should be a positive number. You could write it as positive or just write it as 8. Understand it's positive. What's the degree of the polynomial? The degree of the polynomial is that number there, the 6th. The degree is the 6th. All right, so for this one here, I'll mark it in red. This one here is the one that you need to show me that you can do. Tell me what the leading coefficient is, tell me what the degree of the polynomial is, write it down, and tell me what that is in the drop box. All right, any questions? That is the information about kind of polynomials and terminology of polynomials. So any questions, bring them to class.